Thanks for tuning in to the Football Talk Squadron. I'm Dutch.
And I'm Maul.
Pops is still trying to figure out why they drafted Loveland over Warren. So he'll be missing out. We'll get into that here in a second.
He's on a retreat with Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, yeah. That darkness retreat. Before we get into that, I guess we'll go into the dark side of the draft, which was Mel Kiper complaining how much because Sanders fell. I gave you my opinion in text, and I'll follow up with whatever you're going to go with, but just sort of that's the elephant in the room of the draft. I'll let you get your hot take on it first.
I mean, it was a big deal for like a couple different reasons, and we can talk about that here in a second. I'm a little upset though, kind of the way that it went down, because it basically was the only story of the draft the entire like all 3 days. It was just, where's Shador? And it was, I mean, you kind of mentioned it. It was just really frustrating though, because it was like we didn't talk about Cam Ward for more than like 5 seconds. You know what I mean? Like it was just, it took away from so many other things that were going on, and like good picks by teams or trades, or really just highlighting Cam Ward of being like the number 1 overall pick. It was really unfortunate and really annoying after the first 30 minutes, where it's just like, and you said it best, and I'll kind of let you get on like more of the factual stuff, but like Mel Kiper was just like, he's like, I'm gonna die on this hill today. And it was just like, why are we still listening to this guy? We've said it multiple times, I think now, for 3 straight years, where we're just like, why is he even allowed on TV? I mean, like, why is he even allowed to give his opinion, let alone his opinion on TV? I mean, you have more credibility at a quarterback position than he does in his lifetime. And it's infuriating that he gets so much airtime and so much credit about like Mel Kiper's big board, when he's just completely wrong over and over and over again. That being said, and I guess I won't save it until we get to the Browns, but like, I was surprised he fell as far as he did. I had the Giants pick in our draft, and I didn't take Shador there. Now, I did take him at 9 with the Saints, but that was more or less because I just know how the NFL loves to draft quarterbacks kind of for whatever reason. So I'm not super surprised that he fell out of the first round. I am surprised that he fell all the way to 5th. That being said, though, what a steal for the Cleveland Browns from like a straight value standpoint. It's a win-win. Like, they cannot lose with that pick. And it's like, how dumb are they? They drafted Dillon Gabriel. It's like, who cares? They gave up. I know that Pop said they traded up to get him, which, yeah, got me there. But it's like they gave up nothing to get him in the 5th round. You know what I mean? If he is as good as Mel Kiper really thinks he is, again, think about an absolute steal for a 5th round value. And if he sucks and can't win out from Dillon Gabriel for the starting job, or Joe Flacco, then it's like, whatever. We draft him in the 5th round. You know what I mean? Like, who cares? 5th round dudes get cut all the time. So it was kind of a funny thing, like, in the time, because you were like, wow, that was a total Browns move. But like, thinking about it now, you're like, man, it was really decent value from like, people were talking about him like a 1st round guy, and then he goes all the way to the 5th. Like, it doesn't really matter what position you're talking about. Like, that's a decent steal. I mean, like, ask the Eagles with Jalen Carter, like, guy that was supposed to be number 1, has a little bit of a rough test day, has some things kind of come out about him. Some teams get scared away. The Eagles get him, I think, was it late in the 1st round?
I think it was like still pick number 9 or something.
I mean, still though, like, even then, you know what I mean? He only dropped 8 spots, where Shador dropped 4 rounds. And then it comes down to like actual playing on the field, and people are like, oh yeah, this guy was pretty good. We should have drafted him.
He was Jalen Carter. Yep, 9th overall.
Now, I'm not comparing Shador Sanders because I don't think Shador is that talented. Like, I think he's
Oh,
way
don't worry, Mel
overhyped.
Kiper compared him to every Hall of Famer that existed.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Like, it was so annoying to just watch it because like I stopped watching it. Like, I had to cut away from like the ESPN feed and I had to start watching like the college game day feed or like even just like the Fox feed or whatever one I was watching because I was like, I can't take another second of Mel Kiper.
It's true. I mean, that I sent you guys a text. Was Shador sliding very surprising? Yes, mainly because, and I think you'll agree with this, there was something going on that was outside of talent, mainly because even with talent, like if talent's overwhelming, an NFL team like hates FOMO, like they don't like it at all. They hate being that team. So something spooked teams enough for him to fall like he did. Like, plain simple. And it wasn't just one team, it was every team that needed a quarterback was like, ugh. Like every time that you were sort of on the board, like, oh, here come the Raiders, here come the Browns, here come the Saints, you know, to the point that me and you were like, and Pops were sending texts like, yo, are the Falcons going to draft him? You know, is Cowboys going to draft him?
You know how it is though. Like sometimes they probably either didn't even have him on the board to begin with because they were like, this guy's going number 3 to the Giants, so like we're not even looking at him. Or he starts sliding and people start doing the whole like, what do they know that we don't know? And they don't want to, look like fools with egg on their face by drafting him too high. So it kind of got to the point where everybody's just like, I'm not going to take him. You take him. You know what I mean? But like, I don't know.
And I'll give my little side piece to Shador and sort of where he ends up. I'm in agreement with you in terms of the Browns, like how it was a smart move on their decision. I think the whole reason the whole media thing came out and got as much coverage as it did, because it was the first time that we've seen Mel Kiper's credibility be tested live on air. Like no one's, and I sent you guys a ton of things, which I'll bring up here in a second. No one's like brought out Mel Kiper's dirty laundry in terms of all the times he's been wrong on prospects.
Started putting out receipts.
Yeah, and thrown it right back in his face and been like, I was waiting for it because Mel went on this like rant in day 2 about how, the NFL's done 50 years at draft and we can see that they're not good at evaluating quarterbacks. And I was like waiting for Reese Davis to be like, Mel,
neither are you.
Neither you, dude.
Yeah.
Like just pulled.
You remember a guy named Jimmy Clausen? Remember a guy named Zach Wilson? You remember a guy named Jamarcus Russell? Like, yeah, I mean.
And to put that in perspective, so back in 1998, he ranked Andre Wadsworth. And if you're like, who is that? That's my point exactly. As the number 1 overall prospect, had him in front of Charles Woodson, had him in front of Peyton Manning. He thought that dude was going to be it. He said Kajana Carter was going to be the next Bo Jackson. If you don't know who that is, went to the Bengals, didn't work out. You sit back and you go, he gave him the Seahawks a C- grade when they picked Bruce Evans, Bobby Wagner, and Russell Wilson. He said in 2007, Wes Welker is not worth a second-round pick. I don't care how much you like his work ethic. He's done nothing to show a trade value that high. How did that work out? And then you start going into some stuff that like I sent you guys. You talk about Jimmy Clausen. He literally said on the air that in 8 years, if Jimmy Clausen isn't a, starter and has shown his value, he would retire. He said that back in 2010. And as we can see, it's still 2025. Talks about Brady Quinn. All these like called Jamarcus Russell the next coming of John Elway. Like my man has had some huge misses. So I just think that on national TV, like as we kept seeing Mel Kiper's best available prospects and Shador's kept sitting there, it was one of those ones that ESPN Plus charges people $15 a month for you to go in and pay for Mel Kiper's like opinion. And on national TV, it was like, yo, Mel's wrong. Why am I paying to listen to this guy? Like, that's where I thought that they had such a media circus because they got to protect the brand of ESPN and that we are the forefront of knowledge in sports.
See, and I would love to like believe that they were trying to like rub it in that like this guy's clueless kind of thing. But like, I'll eat my hat if he's not up there next year front and center like he's every year. And it drives, I mean, like this is the only time we ever hear from him. because he knows nothing about anything. Now, as much as we're hating on him, I'll defend him just a little bit, and that it's hard to make these predictions. It's even harder to publicly make these predictions when everybody can, call you out 10 years later due to the internet. You know what I mean? So, like, I'll give him some credit that it does take guts and that there's things that happen in the NFL that are unexplainable. Like, nobody saw Tom Brady coming. You know what I mean? Like, you could make an argument that most people didn't see Patrick Mahomes coming. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of guys that have a lot of talent that don't pan out, and then there's a lot of guys that are kind of absolute nobodies that turn into absolute Hall of Famers. So, like, I don't want to keep this scorecard of like how many misses and how many rights he has, but like, there's a point when you need to just be like, this is my opinion. It's clear that nobody else agrees. And then just leave it at that. But to like, he starts like dogging everybody and starts like calling people out like from different organizations and saying like how they're bad and this is why they'll never do this and all that. And you're just like, dude, give it a rest. Like, you're wrong and you're not winning. It doesn't, after like day 2, it was like, it doesn't even matter when he gets drafted or how he turns out. Like, you were wrong, dude. Like, it's fine. If he turns into a Hall of Famer later, good for him. But I promise you, that's not what you saw. Like, you talked like you saw it, but you're lying. You're just making it up at this point to try to cover your own butt. And that was what was frustrating.
To your point, and this is where I go like back with like cashing in receipts. In terms of how Mel views about Sanders, whether he went 5th overall in the draft to the Browns instead of taking Mason Graham, or he went in the 5th round like he did, he has the same opportunity to be the starter in Cleveland. Like, if he shows up and balls out, it's great. Now, who it really benefits is Cleveland. Like, you sit back and we were sitting back thinking the 2nd round they were going to take
fantastic value for what they got.
Yeah, like, and my only question to you is, with the whole 2nd round, this is more just like a side note. Because they drafted Gabriel, do you think that the owner came in and was like, we're trading up to get Sanders? Because I don't think that something in me goes, I sort of feel like he fell to the point that everyone was like, are we going to take him? We're going to let some, like, there was probably this urge, and I really feel like an owner came in and was like, dude, I don't care. It's a 5th round pick. Go get him. We'll take the risk.
I think that's kind of what happened. Like, because to be honest, like, would you have taken Sanders over Gabriel?
Yes,
I would, 100%. Like,
that's not
that's not even a question in my mind. Excuse me. I just think like it was at the point where they were like 5th round, and they were probably like, dude, who could we take like another random offensive tackle or like a random linebacker from some D3 school, but like Sanders is still sitting there, and you're just like, you know what? Why not? Like, let's see what happens. You know what I mean? Like, again, from like a value standpoint, I look at it like almost like a fantasy draft. Like, you've done fantasy drafts. You know what I mean? There's like Nick Chubb last year. You know what I mean? Like, he's hurt. He's hurt. He's gonna come back at some point. He's like sitting there in the 7th and 8th round, and you're just like, he could come back and be a superstar. Now, he wasn't, but at the same time, you're kind of just like, why not take a flyer? Because like, what am I going to draft, my 5th wide receiver, or like take a flyer on Chubb? Why not? You know what I mean? Like, if you have him in the 5th round from a value standpoint, it's a win-win for the Browns, because now they get this competition to really drive. They're going to force him to show up and play. Like, if the attitude and this like nonchalantness thing was like what drove them away, having multiple people there in the room that's like, dude, the job is not yours. You know what I mean? Like, you can get this take. We drafted, we have 4 guys on the roster currently ahead of you. We want you to go earn it. And if he's just like, I don't think I have to, well, then that's an easy cut. And you're just like, whatever. He was a 5th round pick. We gave up nothing. But if he's like, okay, I'm going to show you and prove all of you wrong, and he turns into this Hall of Famer that Mel Kiper thinks he's going to be, well, then guess what? The Browns just got a quarterback for the next 10 years.
Finally.
Yeah.
And it goes back to that whole, if they had spent the 5th overall pick and he shows up to camp and acts, I think what a lot of people are saying is the reason that he's failed, then you're stuck in a position because you're like, dude, we just burned another 1st round pick on a quarterback.
Classic Browns.
Yep. You look at Johnny Manziel. Brandon Whedon.
Baker
The only guy
Mayfield.
that
I mean, Baker turned out well, but when it comes to the Browns, like they porked it away. They've porked away every quarterback they've had for the
yes,
last 30 years.
Baker. The sad part is Baker was their guy. They just
They screwed it up.
They screwed it up. He was the answer. So, I mean, I like the Browns, and on the opposite side, I'll ask you this: did the Jags give up too much to go get Travis Hunter?
It's tough to say because you don't know what that future first round pick turns into. If it was anybody but the Browns, I would say probably yes. But again, history usually repeats itself where the Browns typically screw up picks. So personally, yes. I all jokes aside on the Browns, I think they made the right move from like they knew what they wanted and they went and got him. I don't think Travis Hunter was really worth that much because I don't think he's going to be this absolute generational game-breaking talent just due to the positions he plays. However, he is really good, and the Jags wanted him, and they saw that, so they went up and got him. So I'm not taking anything away from him. But that additional first-round pick that they kind of tagged on there for next year, I think that was just a little too much, especially considering where the Jags are going to be, probably near the bottom. It's going to be, a high draft pick. So I don't like that.
I agree. It was an interesting. This year, you summed it up best and we got to see it. Like after the first round, you sent out a text to the group that was like, the skill positions in this draft are sort of trash. And by trash, just there wasn't a lot of guys that teams were hyped over. So we saw more of the trenches. Like in years past, it's like, I think I want to take a choice on this like wide receiver because I think he could be that. I don't think any NFL team sat back and saw those guys. So they were like, we're going to take a guard.
Yeah,
Like,
it was like a lot of, I say defensive, not necessarily like defensive side of the ball, but like defensive picks in like you can always use more linemen. You can always use, interior defensive guys. Like they were safer picks. It's just like we can turn most 300-pound guards into something reasonable. Whereas like you take a flyer on a corner and he just doesn't pan out. That's an absolute wasted pick.
Yeah, 100%. It's one of those ones I wrote down a little bit for each team. We're not going to go through every team because like I have the Cardinals and it was like, well, there's no one that they took that I was like, oh, that's going to change the organization. The Cardinals are still going to be the Cardinals.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, in my opinion. The next pick that I'll come to, just because I know it shocked me and you, and we opened up the episode talking about it. It was Loveland over Warren with the Bears, and for me, it was nothing about Loveland. Like I think Loveland's a first round pick.
Sure.
It was more, you said it and I'll let you go with it because you talked about it in the comparison of Bowers and sort of like what Bowers did with Georgia and why everyone was sort of looking at Warren being like, I see the same thing. Why did you not take him?
Yeah. And it was just making a point of like, in the last few years, there hasn't been a ton of guys where Bowers was the perfect example, and Warren fit this as well. Where it was like Georgia 2 years ago was like struggling with teams that they really shouldn't be struggling with, and then like somewhere like late in the third quarter, all of a sudden Bowers would get a catch and just like yeet like 5 different dudes off of him, and then like the next play it could be right back to Bowers, and they throw the ball like 3 or 4 times to him, like, and he was just like unstoppable. And you're sitting there watching the game going like, why didn't they do that the entire game? Like that guy's clearly the best athlete on the field and nobody can stop him. Like there's only been a few dudes that have really had that ability. Bowers was obviously one of them. Warren was the same way with Penn State. Like every time, like he played so many different positions, and there was times where you're like, he's lining up as quarterback. Like I know they're doing something with Warren. He's going to get the ball. And it was like, you still couldn't stop it. Marvin Harrison Jr. a couple years ago was the same way. It was just like he was Ohio State's entire offense because he was so unstoppable on the college field, and you couldn't do anything about it. And when you have the ability to draft that guy, you should. I mean, Bowers even proved it last year in the NFL. They already had
Meyer.
Myers, who they went and drafted the year prior, and everybody thought how dumb the Raiders were because they drafted another tight end. And it turns out, like, hey, when you have a guy with that much talent, it doesn't matter because he's still going to be that good for you. So when the Bears were clearly targeting a tight end and they had a shot at Warren, it seemed like an absolute layup. And then they go with Loveland. And again, there's nothing taken away from Loveland, but like Loveland didn't take over any games. He's a fine tight end. He'll do fine. He has enough weapons around him, and Caleb Williams will throw him the ball. But it was just like, man, could you imagine like what they could have had with Warren? You know what I mean? Like it's just that next level up.
Yes, and I said it as soon as they did it. I was like, whoever takes Warren, turned out it was the Colts. It's like, from Ryan Pohl's position, you will eat it. No matter how good Loveland is, Loveland could be great. He could be a 10-year starter. But if Warren looks like the next Brock Bowers and is just, has 100 catches next year for the Colts, regardless of how good or bad the Colts do overall, if he appears to be like, man, we really missed out on that pick, it will haunt the organization, because it's like you could have paired Caleb Williams with this guy, and instead you didn't take it.
I don't understand it at all.
There's numerous drafts of, you go all the way back to Mahomes and Trubisky. The Bears have been known for taking guys at certain positions that other guys worked out far more generously in the long run. Let's see. The other thing I like, Packers finally drafted a wide receiver. You could tell the whole crowd was in on it too.
It's just, someone to be excited about. My dad was talking about, how many wide receivers do the Packers need, and it's just like that's not the point. You know what I mean? Like quantity doesn't do really anything for you in the NFL. You need a quality dude. Like Jaden Reed, in my opinion, is really the only one who's worth his weight, because all the other guys either were just way too fluky or kept getting hurt. They can't stay on the field. So it's something exciting for the Packers, to have another weapon. And who knows? Some people said Golden was the best wide receiver in the draft, so you don't know if those guys pan out. But again, from a Packers fan perspective, you can tell why they were so excited, especially because they've never done it, right? It was the first time
since
ever.
2002.
Okay, so for a long time they've been dreaming of this, because they've had Rodgers for so long, and it was always just like, get him a weapon, and they never did. So finally they get themselves a weapon.
You talk about wide receivers, and that led me to the next surprise that immediately came into my mind. Buccaneers taking Ibuka.
Ibuka, yeah.
Sitting there. And in my opinion, I think it was the steal. I know he fell super far. I was even talking with you guys about, I had him looked at as a first round pick, which probably speaks more to my football knowledge as a poor thing rather than a good thing. Tez Johnson out of Oregon fell to him. That was their last pick in the draft. And I just like Tez and I like Ibuka, because both of those guys, in my opinion, they're not the guy. It's a perfect scenario for Ibuka. Like, you don't got to go be Mike Evans. We have Mike Evans.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need you to be Chris Godwin. We got Chris Godwin. I need you to be the third best wide receiver that terrorizes whatever corner that they match up on you.
Yeah, like, or some poor safety that they drop down. You know what I mean? Because like, they've got to pay attention to Mike Evans, because he's Mike Evans.
He's the most 1,000-yard seasons ever.
I love Chris Godwin, and this is why I love the pick, but Godwin is questionable right now. You know what I mean? Like, we know how good he is. So if he comes back and he's healthy, yeah, you gotta put people on Godwin too. And even with just those two, we've seen how explosive that offense can be with Baker slinging it. So you add a third downfield weapon, outside of like Kate Otten, the tight end. Like, yes, I love Ibuka in there. Even if Godwin doesn't come back, it's not like he has to be thrust into that role, because again, there's still Mike Evans on the other side. So it's a really good pick to like hedge your bet against Godwin, but then just boost, even further if Godwin comes back. Tez Johnson, I had my own opinions on him. I don't think there's obviously a skill set there. However, where he got drafted, I think is kind of where he deserved to be drafted, just simply because like speed can't just be everything. You know what I mean? Like he's really small, and we've seen guys struggle with taking that next leap from college to pros when you add that kind of size. I'm not saying he's going to be bad. I do think he should have been drafted kind of where he did get drafted. We'll just see how that one pans out.
Yeah, the reason I just like a guy with the work ethic of like just fighting for the football. Like a wide receiver that's willing to, I don't care if I got to do a crossing route, whatever it takes for me to go get the football I'm going to do. I wrote Bucks are going to be the offensive NFC South juggernaut because no one should really touch them in that division. They should run away with it this coming year, which the only team that should have, and this is, I wanted to bring them up because of last year and it ties in with this year, is the Falcons in their division. It's like they have a first round pick, they take Jalen Walker. Well, then they trade up into it and they give up a first round pick next year to take James Pierce. And it was like, I get you got,
where was this last year?
Yes, like you could have had Verse. Like this is why you should have went defensive line. It's nothing against Penix. It's like you knew that you needed help on the defense. And what it cost you is it now cost you a future draft pick that you don't know where it's going to be. Like I am sure that when the Panthers traded for Bryce Young, they did not know that they were giving up the number 1 overall pick the following year to the Bears. Like,
yeah,
but that's what they did.
And I look at it like, do they look smarter now because Kirk Cousins didn't play super well, so they have Penix? Yeah, maybe. In my opinion, Cousins wasn't playing that awful. Like, all things considered, they were still in the hunt for the playoffs, mainly due to their division being bad, but like still, they were in the hunt for the playoffs with Cousins at the helm. So I look at it as like, even if Cousins isn't playing that well, which team would you prefer? Cousins at QB with Verse and Jalen Walker, or now Penix at QB with Walker and James Pierce? You know what I mean? Like, to me, that's an easy choice because, like you said, you don't know what that future draft pick even turns into. Plus, I think you've got better guys on both sides of the ball. So it's not like Penix came out and was just like the next hand of God. You know what I mean? He still was like very average, and it was like Kirk could have done that for you. You know what I mean? Like that's where I just, like you said, where was this last year? Like they're trying to make up for it in a different year's draft. Now they still needed those players, so I'm glad that they at least learned their lesson, and I think they did get 2 really good defensive side of the ball guys. It was just, you would rather had Verse from last year and just be stuck with Cousins.
Which it's funny because this is where I like go back to the Falcons and why they're a bad organization. They're still stuck with Cousins. Yeah. Like you could have cut him and saved a few million, but and then so that was sort of like going into the draft as everyone was like, well, I wonder where Kirk Cousins is going to get traded to. Well, then the draft's over and you're like, wait, we still have him? And you're like, yeah. They're like, well, what are you going to do with him? And it's like, I guess we're going to keep him.
Even at this point, even if you trade him, like you're still stuck with his money. You know what I mean? Like that's why I don't understand what the grand scheme there was.
To like, if he's not good enough to start for you, then you shouldn't be afraid for him to go start somewhere else. Like,
or like maybe you shouldn't have signed him to a 4-year, however many $1 million,
3 years, 180.
You know what I mean? Like, if there was questions to begin with, why did you sign that kind of deal?
It's the Falcons. They just, it's the thing that like drives me nuts with them. And then on the opposite side, like I sit back in another team and like going through my list is it never fails that as we talk about, like even in a draft like this where there's some reaches in round 1, you could argue that. But yet again, like you have the Eagles sitting there drafting the number 1 viewed linebacker in Jahad Campbell. And then you look at the rest of their draft and it's just like, dude, they got the Eagles are fine. And in fact, the rich got richer. Like even the Campbell said that when he got drafted. Like, thank you. I would have rather went and played for the Super Bowl defending champions than gone to the Browns.
It's very apparent, like when it's like it didn't matter if the Eagles were drafting 1 or 32nd. Like they still drafted better than the Cardinals and the Falcons. Maybe not the Falcons. The Falcons had an okay draft, but it's just like like there's plenty of teams out there that were drafting well ahead of the Eagles in every round and ended up with a worse draft class than the Eagles did.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because them, the Chiefs, the Ravens, it's like it's one of those
great draft.
Yeah, dude, and what's scary, the only team that I sit back and I'm like, I don't know. It's probably my least favorite draft of all the teams was the Bills.
I was going to say the exact same thing. Like their number one guy was Kentucky, and
corners are just so hit and miss.
Yeah, but like everybody else, you're just like, man, for a team. Now, don't get me wrong. I said this last year about the Bills, that it was like they don't have anybody to be excited about. All they got is Josh Allen. They still did really, really well. That being said, when stuff like that happens, you kind of get excited at the thought of like, man, all they got to do is draft a couple dudes and they can be even better. And then they have this just like absolute mid draft, and you're like, you're the same team. You didn't get any better.
I don't know if you know this because it just happened today. Did you see about their GM?
I didn't.
Yeah. So what we're doing right now, what you just said is exactly what these Buffalo radio guys said. Well, they had the GM like scheduled for that day. Well, he hits on and he's like, I don't get you guys. He's like, you guys complain when we got Josh Allen. You guys complained last year we didn't have wide receivers and he won MVP. And they pretty much said the same thing that you did. They were like, yes, but like that's sort of the thing.
That was the surprise. Yeah.
Yeah. We were all shocked. Like, and it was one of the, I go back to like Rodgers, where it's just like every year you were like, dude, this dude's balling. Can you imagine if they put some talent around him? And it's like they just never would. And it's one of those things where you never will know. Like you'll never know how good they could have been if they had put some guys around him that you set back. If they just drafted Worthy instead of Coleman. Nothing against Coleman, but it's like, can you imagine if Josh Allen could throw the football 80 yards to a Worthy that no one can guard deep down the field? Like,
and I get it, right? Like they're thinking we're so close. Like, and you've seen this. I mean, like ask the 49ers. You have these windows of like good teams and it's fleeting and then it disappears. You know what I mean? It's like the Bills have been super close for this window, and either they win one or that window's going to disappear. You know what I mean? So it's just like, think about how good we were without talent. If you could have just drafted somebody, we could have taken that next step. Like we don't want to be the Steelers that go 8-8 for 20 years straight. You know what I mean? Like we don't want to be that's a bad comparison because the Steelers have so many Super Bowls, but you get my point. You know what I mean? Like at some point, just making it isn't enough. You know what I mean? Like if you're trying to be a truly good organization, like Super Bowls need to be the goal. That can't be the goal for everybody, right? Like if you're the Cleveland Browns, you're just like, hey, we need to have a winning record. Like if you're the Cowboys, you're like, we just want to make the playoffs. When you start becoming these teams that are perennial good teams, you're like, just making the playoffs isn't going to cut it. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's why the Lions are so fascinating right now. It's because they went from this team that was literally just like, we just want to have a win, to like, we're shooting for Super Bowls in a very small amount of time. And that was exciting to watch, but they did that purposely and put the right people in place, like at the right time in order to make that happen. And having these mediocre drafts or not doing any offseason moves isn't going to cut it.
Yeah. I'll go to the Lions because I'm always down to just take a dump on Mel Kiper again. Anytime that Mel Kiper comes out and he gave the Lions like a C+, I'm like, so what you're telling me is yet again an A+ class, like because that's the way it's going to work out.
They're going to nail it.
They're going to nail it.
Yeah. Good luck or have fun with your NFC North Championship Lions.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that the only team he gave an A+ grade to was. Do you know the answer to this?
I don't.
Who do you think it was?
Cleveland, because they took
Shador. Cleveland because they got Shador in the 5th. Like he stuck to his guns throughout the whole thing. I don't really like the whole grading guys until they've played. Sure. It's more just like, I think what we've done so far this episode is it's talking about like the cost that it took to go get some, just like with Jacksonville And
it's a perception gauge, not an actual grade of talent or anything like that.
yeah, it's just one of those ones where, hey, did you give up too much?
Well, yeah, 'cause, I mean, let's be honest. Most of these guys aren't like day one starters anyway. That's not like ever what the draft is supposed to be. It's kind of turned into that lately, but like that's not what the draft is supposed to be. But that's how it feels like some of these guys assign their grades. Like these dudes are like, if you put all round, 7 rounds of these dudes on the field day one, are they good? And it's like, no, that's not the point. It's a perception grade of like, did what we know they have, did they improve just on the eye test from what they picked up.
To go back to the Steelers, I've never seen a team that was after a draft that I was like, they're really counting on Rodgers showing up, because if not, I don't know how they're. Good luck having a winning season this year. I know you got Mason Rudolph, but the division got better. Like the Browns got better. They
Mason Rudolph is a liability.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't look too hot last year for the Titans.
He had like 1 or 2 games ever that he's played well.
Yeah, and those all came before he got head bonked by Myles Garrett.
Yeah.
How quickly NFL did a great job of burying that film. They were like,
so much so that they let him go to another team before they brought him back.
Yeah, and Will Howard. This is all. I keep going back to this like Shador thing because I saw this text or this tweet this morning. It was like, Will Howard won a national championship. Ewers took him to a playoff, beat Bama, did all these things. And it was like, but no one like blinked an eye when those guys fell. Yeah. Like they accomplished more on a collegiate field than Shador did.
100%.
Like from a winning standpoint, it doesn't really matter. My question to you guys was, Pop's never answered, but you did. Does Shador get a start before or after week 9 of the season, or just not at all?
I think it's a higher probability that he does get a start, just again because he's on the Browns. So at some point, I think during the season, either because he shows up and starts playing really well, or they're kind of like so far out of the playoffs, they're just like, let's see what happens. Like, let's just give him a shot. Before week 9, I don't think so. That seems early to me. And again, I this is predicated on I don't think he's going to like show up and all of a sudden like blow people away with talent. If I thought that was a possibility, I would maybe say earlier than week 9. Like if he had Caleb Williams level talent, I would say earlier, because again, that's someone to get excited for. But we saw Joe Flacco literally take them to the playoffs, right? So like Joe Flacco is the guy. I have no idea what Watson's status even is, or whether he's even going to play this year.
Well, he had a second surgery on that Achilles.
My gut says no.
Yeah.
And then again, I said it, I don't think Shador has this blow away talent. He's fine. I think he's better than Dylan Gabriel, but I think there is no rush, and if the Cleveland was smart, which we know they're not, they wouldn't rush him into the starting job for those reasons. Like, who cares? Like, it's really going to just depend on how the season goes. Again, I don't see the Browns really being super competitive. So just, because they got the Ravens and the Bengals to deal with. But so you'd maybe take a bet. I'm going to say over week 9.
There we go. The other thing I was going to ask you, this is a little bit of a longer-winded question, so I'll give you some time to think about it. But it was a good, whether or not it's true or not, it was a tweet. I always think that they were evaluating this before NIL, but this was sort of the part like with the NIL that I really think that they are looking into, and I think it probably did affect Sanders, is they talked about like the love of the game, which it's not, let's be honest, it's a business. Guys,
100%.
They're not going to play football for free. Guys enjoy it and they're really good at it, but it's still got to pay the bills. No matter what job you have, if you're not getting paid to do it, you're probably not going to do it. I think with NIL, though, it is something that teams are now trying to evaluate, because even before NIL, they were really trying to evaluate, like, hey, if we take you in the first round and now you went from having no money to having $40 million, what are we going to get out of you? Like, what's the level that we're going to see? And I think that with Shador, it was like, and some other guys in the draft, I think that NIL now is starting to negatively affect guys because what do they see? Like, they see a guy that was like wearing like a Rolex during a game, flashing it to opponents. And it was like, hey, like, I get it's college, you're hyped up, you have money. That's not going to fly here. This is the NFL. Like, we don't do that. And it's one of those questions of, well, if his own dad couldn't control him, like, how are you going to control him? And my question for you is like, do you think that that aspect of NIL is hurting future prospects coming in? And how do you think that's going to like sort of resolve itself out?
Yeah, that's a it depends kind of question. Shador specifically, I think it absolutely did hurt him, right? In the sense of, especially from the quarterback position. I mean, we see it every single year. Like, what happens when all these dudes' rookie contracts run out? You know what I mean? Like,
To the roof.
yeah. So if you have any level of talent, or in a lot of guys' cases, ask Trevor Lawrence, it's just the possibility of talent, right? Or this appearance that like we're pot committed to this dude. He has to be our guy because we took him number 1 overall. We have to pay him. Ask the Giants with Daniel. Like, there's so many teams that have done that. And I think that was one of the main reasons why Shador fell so low. Because it was like, if we draft this dude at number 3, or we draft this dude at number 9, or if we take him in the first round, kind of regardless of his performance, we're pot committed to this dude because we wasted a first round draft pick on him. And if you think it's a problem now, wait till that rookie contract runs out, and now he's asking for $1 billion to play quarterback for you. You know what I mean? You're just like, I don't want to deal with that. Like, that's a four-year away headache that I just don't want to deal with. So I'll just take Jackson Dart, that is just as surprised as everybody else, to go in the first round. You know what I mean? Which, don't get me wrong, I think the Giants, I thought that was a fantastic move. Like, what they did was like, they were probably stunned that they even got Abdul Carter, which again, I think could have been the number 1 talent in the draft. And then to do the little trade back up into the first round was just this like little okey doke that the Texans did a few years ago. And it was like, this was amazing. Like, and because they got their guy, they liked Jackson Dart and they got their guy. I loved it. It was fantastic. But you're probably not going to have to deal with this multi-$100 million contract in 4 years if he doesn't perform. You know what I mean? Whereas I feel like regardless of Shador's performance, he's going to be asking for that.
100%.
You draft him in the 5th round, and again, it's like this win-win where it's like, if he performs well enough where you're like, we're going to keep this guy, well then fine, you pay your quarterback just like you pay every other quarterback, because now he's your guy. But if he doesn't perform, you don't feel like you have to pay him, because you're just like, you didn't perform, you were a 5th round pick, you're cut, or you take the league minimum, or whatever it is. You know what I mean? I think, hey, I can't believe I'm saying this, I feel like the Browns really played this one smart.
Yeah, they got super fortunate with how it worked out. And I agree with you in that standpoint of, from a negotiating standpoint, in 4 years, dude, it's so many times, just as you talked about, teams are unwilling to admit that they made a mistake by drafting. I mean, we look at Anthony Richardson. The Colts are coming up to that time where it's like, we got to make a call. Do we pay the dude or do we let him walk? The Bears were with it with Fields, and you know what they did? They said, we're going to let him walk. Now, they were in the blessing of having the number 1 overall pick, so it made it a lot simpler to know we're going to take
guy
Caleb.
worth picking too. That's the biggest thing. It's like, a lot of these teams, not only do they make a mistake, but even if they admit it 3 years later and then go, okay, well, we got to move on, they think like, it doesn't matter what the talent is like, we just got to take the number 1 guy. And we've seen on multiple occasions that that's not always the case. It's got to be the right guy. Like, there's got to be the talent coming out that year for you to pick him.
You already made it known in your pre-draft, because I was going to follow back up with this team because I had this question written down, that you were going to take Sanders with the 9th overall pick. But let's go back to the 2nd round. You're sitting there. Given the choice, would you take Slow or would you take Sanders? I know that Sanders ends up falling to the 5th, but in that moment, what would you have done?
I mean, it's tough. I picked Sanders in the draft when we did the draft. I picked Sanders at 9. So I'd be talking out of both sides of my mouth if I didn't say Sanders. However, I also did make it known that I knew there were a lot of teams that were high on the dude out of Louisville. I think I can't I always say it wrong. I always say Slow, but I know it's pronounced like Slouch or Slouch or something like that.
Well, it's funny because he was the guy that when we did the over and under 2.5, that was your guy to be
that
the
was
third
my
quarterback.
third, yeah. Which he was the third. just got the second one wrong.
Yeah, who knew that it was going to be Dart and Slough? The only thing that I go back,
Shuck.
I know that
it's Shuck.
Whatever.
Tyler Shuck. I was saying Show. It's Shuck.
The thing about it, I know this
people watching this podcast like these idiots don't even know how to pronounce these guys' names.
I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb and say it's probably not going to matter here in a few years.
It's Shuck.
Because I've seen some of that dude's film and some of it's atrocious. There's this one, he's like running away and he just like yeets it like Will Levis up into like a group of 5 defenders and it gets picked. And like there were times, and Saban said it. Saban was like, look, I get it. This dude's been in college. I don't know if you knew this. He was high school on the same high school team as Trevor Lawrence. Like he was Justin Herbert's like backup in Oregon. This dude's been in college for 7 years. But Saban pointed out, he was like, you know what, Bo Nix, he had at least won like 70 games. He's like, Slough's only like seen the field for 20 games because he's been hurt so much. Like, it's, to me, with the Saints, I think it was one of those ones where they knew they needed a quarterback. I really think the reason the Giants traded up is because they knew the Saints were going to take Dart given the opportunity. And I think the Giants were like, we're in a position now that we're just going to go get him before the Saints move up. We're not going to let this linger any longer. I am surprised they took him. Just he falls into this like typical quarterback of the Saints. I don't see it from him. Now, I've been wrong. It is funny at the beginning of the episode, we talked about how we were wrong. Like, yeah, we got Bo Nix wrong last year. I said that was a terrible pick. Came out, played very well. How he does in the future, we'll find out. But he vastly exceeded our expectations. The thing I worry was, how do we say his name again?
Shuck. Like shucking an oyster.
With Shuck is he's going to a terrible team. Like, I get it. They have Alvin Kamara. They have a beat up Taysom Hill. But outside of that, you know, you look at position of the head coach, you know, here we go all over again with now I can see his face. His name's just escaping me.
You talking about the coach?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't have it off the top of my head.
The guy that was with Dallas and then last year with Eagles. Hold on. Now I gotta look it up. Kellen Moore. Yes. I sit back and look at that and I go, I look at Sanders and Shuck and I go, Sanders is in a better position for all the reasons that we just talked about. Like for Shuck, you're the first quarterback that the Saints taken off the board. And I already ruined this trivia question with you earlier. The Saints are still the only team in the last 50 years of football who have not taken a quarterback in the first round. The last time they did it was 1971 with Manning.
Archie Manning, yeah.
Dang, like it's been a while. There's a lot more that I think that they know Carr's not their guy. I think Shuck gets shucked right into the game, and it's probably going to be a painful learning down there.
Yeah, that was going to be my only rebuttal. I don't disagree with anything you say, but he doesn't have to necessarily be thrown right into the fire just because David Carr or Spencer Rattler are still there. You know what I mean? So he can at least hopefully learn a little bit. That being said, to make the comparison with Bo Nix, even though we didn't think Bo Nix was like this generational talent, I think we both would agree that he was talented. And there is something to be said, and Bo Nix proved it, that it's a joke when it's like, you've played, yeah, of course you had the most wins in college football. You played twice as long as everybody. That does translate though to the NFL. You know, it's an experience level of like the more snaps you see and the more pressure and the more high level competition you've played against will translate. And Bo Nix translated it great. Now, Shuck was with Louisville, so they weren't playing like this super high level of competition all the time, and he wasn't like the starter for a whole lot of his career. But again, it's that whole like he's taken more snaps than most of the rookies have. You know what I mean? So that may translate a little better for him coming out. But yeah, again, I don't think the Saints are in a super great position here.
Well, I mean, yes, in terms of the experience, I think I immediately go back to Trubisky. Like the guy had started 12 games and gets drafted by the Bears. And it's like, we knew he was talented. How do I even explain that now? Because he's still a backup in the league.
Yeah.
Like there's more than enough teams that are like, no, we will pay for you to come be here because you know how to throw the football.
Yeah.
And given a situation where we have to sub you in, we know you're smart enough and talented enough to at least keep us competitive in a game. You're not our number one guy, but we'd love to have you in a position that if things went wrong, we could turn to you.
Yeah. You can be our Matt Castle.
Yeah. We'll see how in terms, that's the only thing that I worry about.
Chad Henne.
Yeah. Ryan Fitzpatrick, baby. All day, any day. That's give me Fitz magic any day for a backup under any universe.
Fitz was a special character though, because he was so good. He just kept bouncing because he was better than most people's starters. You know, he was just like he should have always been a backup, but he was so good. He was like this tier 1.5 where like you know, like he's not your Patrick Mahomes or your Tom Brady, but he's so much better than like your standard Mitch Trubisky coming in off the bench.
He was just that hot flash in a pan. Like he would just have these like 3 straight games. I still remember him going down with the Bucks and like winning, came out with Deshaun Jackson's clothes on with that chain.
He did it like 8 years though. It was like this is the longest flash in the pan of all time.
But he did it with like every team that he played with. He'd always like have this like run that you were like, God, it fits magic. It's crazy.
Gotta sign this guy.
Yeah. And then they like make him the starter the next year, and they're like, maybe you weren't that.
Shoot.
Yeah. We're gonna have to go draft somebody else. That will be the interesting thing. I know it's way too early to look at. Next year, they were already talking about it. And it's true, there's a ton of quarterbacks next year that's coming out in the draft. The only one that like makes me angry when guys say it is Archie Manning, just because yet again, it's a name. Like we've yet to see the guy play.
Yeah.
Like, and I said this to you downstairs while we were watching the first round. Ewers went in the 7th round to Miami, which is the guy that Manning set behind the whole time last year. Now, there's a lot of, you were arguing it downstairs, of which I agree with, that Sark was probably in a position like he didn't want to burn bridges, and like
he felt committed to Ewers. Ewers was his guy. He didn't have to move away from Ewers. I know people wanted him to, but he didn't have to because they were winning. Like that's the benefit of winning games is you don't you have time. You get to really sit back and you're not pressured into like, if I don't do something, my job is on the line. You know what I mean? Like Ewers was still winning him games. I think they played Manning enough to like appease the need to see Manning. But I also think that if Texas, who was supposed to be really good, and they were, if they started losing a bunch of games, because Ewers was not playing well. I'm not saying that. He played well enough with the rest of the team around them to win games. But if they started losing games that they had no business losing to, I also have no doubt in my mind that switch would have been made really quickly. I just think he felt committed to Ewers because he's like, this is my guy. I know he's leaving to the draft. I'm trying to keep his draft stock up. And he had the benefit of winning.
All I know is that somewhere right now, Pop's glasses are fogging up with the idea because I know if he was here, he'd be like, no, if we had just played Manning earlier, we would have beat Ohio State in the playoffs. We would have been national championships. Texas would have been back.
He's probably right. But
Yeah.
I mean, I say probably. He could have been right. I don't know if probably. Like Ohio State was really good this year, and I don't know. Like there was times where Arch would play, and you're like, man, that dude looks good. But he wasn't. He didn't play enough to really see him ever get into a rhythm. So there was times where you're kind of like, like I think he played enough sometimes though that you were like, I don't know if he's really that much better than Quinn. So and that's the point that you're making. So again, I just go like, maybe we don't know. We'll find out here next year.
That was the only thing with, because I just go back to Tua and Jalen. When Tua got on the field, everyone was like, man, this kid can throw.
Oh yeah.
Like it was a clear cut difference, not in terms of mobility. Jalen was always the better runner, but from a throwing standpoint, everyone was like, yo, dog, I really think this Tua kid needs to play more. Like that's the only thing with Manning that I never saw. Like he was a better runner than yours, but at no point was like, man, this kid is just threading the needle for them. Makes me worried. Now, as much as Pops may have been right, I also, it's totally out of love. Pops is still the person that argues that Vince Young should have beat Reggie Bush out for the Heisman. So Pop's opinion only goes so far when it comes to his love of Texas. I laughed because I saw his first round. In the first round, he picked Gunnar Helm, the tight end at Texas, and he went like in the 6th round. I'm like, dude, you're just like Mel Kiper with Texas players. Like you thought way too highly of your guy. And he fell
Helm
back.
was fine. We just there's just when you got Loveland or you got Warren sitting there.
Which that was the only other team that I wrote that I was like, you know what? I actually like their drafts for once, was the Giants and the Jets. Like Giants, you got Carter, like, and you got Cam Scatterbo. Like, I really like the Cam Scatterbo pick.
Love the Giants draft. Like again, I think, are they all of a sudden this contender? No, because it's still the Giants. But again, this is that whole perception thing of just like what they needed and what they were presented. I think they did exactly what they needed to do. Like as bad as many decisions that as they've made in the past, like I really do think they had a really good draft.
And the Jets, like, they go out and get what Pops and a lot of people thought was the best offensive tackle in Membu. Then I love the tight end Mason Taylor.
Like, he's really good too.
Fantastic. They go get the corner from Florida State, who the only reason he fell a little bit is because Florida State was trash last year and he got hurt. They get Malachi Moore, safety. I think he'll do well, like in that sort of nickel position that you can move him around. He's not the best to cover guys, but from a safety standpoint, he'll be a good free safety over the top that's not having to be such a liability in coverage. I like what they helped out Fields. Like, you got to give him an offensive line. You got him another pass catcher outside of Garrett Wilson, someone for him to throw to. Like you said, neither one of those teams do I expect for them to compete for the division. But in terms of being a good first step forward, which is unlike them in the draft, they did well.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that is a byproduct of the overall talent being what we all perceive as slightly lower this year? Like these teams that are not just distracted by shiny objects because there weren't that many shiny objects could finally just sit back and go, all right, what do we need? Who's the best on the board? Let's take that guy. As opposed to like, I don't care if we've got 3 quarterbacks. There's a really good quarterback sitting on the board. Let's go get him. And that's what it feels like these teams like the Jets and the Browns and the Giants typically do. And you're sitting there going, God, like, yeah, he's a good player, but like we could have been better if you would have drafted XYZ. And because there wasn't that like shiny object for them to go get, they kind of just stuck to what they needed and stuck to a board. And when we sit back now, days after the draft, kind of look at it and go, because you're right. I agree with you. Like, I think the Browns had a good draft. I think the Jets had a good draft. I think the Giants had a good draft, which like the fact that all 3 of those dudes in the same draft had a good draft, I mean, that's probability of less than 1%. You know what I mean? So I don't know. You think, is that reasonable from a logic standpoint?
Oh, it's more than reasonable. I would argue that it's probably 90% of why it worked out the way that it did, mainly because those teams have always proven that with anything shiny that they think could immediately like drastically change their organization, they're willing to make a it's sort of like snake eyes on the craps table. Yeah, dude, it's 100 to 1 odds that $5 chip is going to multiply to 500 or whatever it is. But sometimes you sit back and you just look at the pass line and like, hey, we can double up our money. Like,
Let it
and they're
ride.
like, yeah, they're like, you snake eyes it is. Throw it all on black, Jimmy. Like, that's how I feel with them. But at the same time, I also go back. There was something else in this draft, and we sort of mentioned it before with Genty, and I really think it's going back to this that the NFL. It's interesting to me that a few years ago it was unheard of for a running back to go in the first round. We just had 2 this year, and I think it goes back to this whole like you look at the Raiders last year. Like we had a whole episode about running back by committee, which works when you have good players. The Raiders didn't have them. And the Giants and the Titans both set back and they were like, we have a star player that we don't want to pay. We'll let him go somewhere else. And they went somewhere else. You know what they did? One of them won a Super Bowl, and the other was Mark Andrews away from at least trying to go to a Super Bowl.
Which I think the point you're making is that like good organizations don't just try to go, what's everyone else doing? Like, let's fit the mold for what's hot right now. Like, what do we have? They look at what we have, what we need, and how we get better either right now or build for the next 3 years. Because like you said, the Eagles were like notorious for being running back by committee for basically since Shady. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
all of a sudden they get Barkley, who, like you said, the Giants were willing to go, you know what, one running back isn't good enough. And it's almost convinced the entire league that like you could have someone like Saquon, but not be good because running backs are a dime a dozen. And then it turns out, oh, he was just on the really bad team. And again, it's kind of made that, hey, dude, if you get someone like that, you can take this okay team, because the Eagles weren't a slouch to begin with, but it's like they couldn't win the big game, and all of a sudden you add this piece to it, blew them out of the water.
Yeah. It's and I look at even bad teams that you sit back, you look at the Giants, Jets, other teams. It's like this year when they had to make a decision, do we like take some wide receiver? In which I go back to the shiny penny. I think if the pennies were a little bit shinier, they probably take a little bit more of a gamble because they think there's a higher ceiling to a player. But I think it's going to work out for a lot of teams that draft it, like the Jets and Giants. That we made our line better. And you know what happens when your line's better? You can take a little bit of an offset with running back and some other pieces, and they all get better. Like, I don't care. We've said last year the Chiefs lost the Super Bowl. Why? Because their offensive line sucked against the Eagles. That was the reason why. Like, don't get me wrong, they didn't play good, but the Eagles' defensive line demolished the Chiefs that entire game. And then the Chiefs' defensive line could not do anything to the offensive line of the Eagles. The Eagles, even with Saquon, they didn't need it because they couldn't get the Jalen. It was just like a free throw. He was able to pass the ball with no pressure. Chris Jones, the only time that he made any note was laying sideways on the goal line, which didn't work. Like, it's true. Like, that's where I go to, where it's just like when you build the trenches, it tends to work out for you, which you were hyping. It was the text made me so happy of you just attacking Pops on day 2. Like, will you guys please take an offensive lineman? He's like, we made it better. And he's like, you said that last year. Y'all didn't make it any better. So when they finally drafted an offensive lineman and you were like, praise God. I was dying.
A perfect example though, I was just looking at them, is the Bengals. Because if the Bengals didn't take either an offensive lineman or a defensive player for every single pick, I was going to be furious. And they waited all the way until round 6 to draft a running back, but everybody else before that, defense, guard, defense, offensive tackle, like that's what they needed. Are any of their picks super sexy? No. Like, they're all good, fine players, but none of them are like, wow, they're gonna, that guy's gonna be amazing. But you know
We're gonna
what?
sell some jerseys.
But you know what? It was exactly what they needed. You know what I mean? Like, it was exactly what they needed, and they took the guy who they thought was the best fit at that position at the time of the draft, and that's fine. That's what you're supposed to do.
It's what makes your team better. Plain and simple. So I think that's, we made some good points on like Mel Kiper. That's the whole goal. As long as the day I sound like Mel, I will retire. I'll be done.
Yes. As long as nobody listens to this episode and go, I don't know how those guys feel about Mel Kiper, then I think we've done our job.
Even my dad knew what I was going to do today. I told him I was going to film. He's like, "You going to say something about Mel?" You better believe I'm going to say something about Mel.
Damn right I'm going to.
Had to listen to that idiot. I was in the same boat. Literally after the first day of the draft, I was like, dude, I ain't listening to this again. I'm going to go ABC.
Couldn't do it.
Like, cannot listen. And it was funny because even not listening to him, like when I log on social media, they'll be like, "Oh, listen to what Mel said about saying he's losing his mind." And I was like, thank God I'm not listening to that because that drove me crazy.
Yeah.
So, well, now that the draft's over, it'll give us a little bit of time to prepare before the season kicks off. We'll get you and Pops to sit down, do the same thing we did. What's funny is last year we all had the Super Bowl matchup. We predicted at the beginning of the season, but then no one stuck to their guns except for you going into the Super Bowl. We all had different ideas as we got into the playoffs, but we did predict the actual Super Bowl last year, and you actually predicted the Eagles to win. Me and Pop said the Chiefs. So you're one up on us in terms of predictions. So we'll get into it with the annual prediction episode going into season 3 here in a few weeks. And then we'll also get into college as well. We haven't talked a whole lot of college. There's nothing more to talk about outside of than thinking you're worth $4 million and taking a couple $1 million pay cut to go play for UCLA. So
rough.
That
in front of I saw a meme that was like, if you overthrow a receiver but nobody's there to see it, does it actually happen? Savage.
It's great. I at least appreciate it from a college football standpoint that I feel like the tide, it's not even big. It's just starting the turn that,
yeah.
And it was
the pendulum has at least stopped swinging. It hasn't started coming back yet, but it might have at least stopped going in the ridiculous direction that it is because it's out of control.
And anyone that believes it's not going to come back the other ways, history would prove you wrong 100%. It's going to swing the other way. It's just a matter of time. Universities, the fact that a college kid could take money from a university, immediately transfer, not have to give any of that money back, no consequences, go play for another team, leave that team the following year, take that money and go to it's not going to last forever. The guys that are sort of like living in this time zone will like laugh about here in 20 years being like, can you believe that these guys did this like during this time period? And people are going to look at it like it's pretty much like the NFL before the salary cap and free agency, like, which used to be a thing that they would just be like, you either sign with us or we don't let you go. And finally the NFL was like, maybe free agency would be a good thing. Like change the whole league. So outside of that, anything else before we sign off?
That's it.
Well, thanks for tuning in, guys. As I said, we'll get back here in a few weeks with a preview of the NFL season and talk about a little college football. Time Pull Drops.
Peace.